So what if I told you Franken patterning wasn't cheating? It's actually the way that sewing was always meant to be. So then why do so many of us feel like it's cheating or breaking the rules? I think that somewhere along the way, we kind of just fell into this pattern. We thought that sewing is buying a pattern, getting fabric and following the instructions, and that's it. But I'm here to tell you that really good sewing has always been about pattern hacking, if that's what you want to call it. So Franken patterning wasn't the exception, it was the rule. And so in this video, I want to talk to you about what is Franken patterning and why you should be doing it so you can really start sewing the clothes that you always dreamed of, like why it's the key to sewing those clothes you dream of. Boy, do we have a good topic today. Is there no better keyword than Franken patterning on the internet right now? But welcome my sewing friends, and if you are actually brand new here, my name is Evelyn Wood, and here on this channel we talk about sewing our own clothes, but not just sewing them. My jam is to help you sew the clothes that you really dream of, doing good quality, focusing on the skill of dressmaking, of sewing, of tailoring. Like, this is what we do here. And if that's what you're interested in too, go hit the subscribe button. Do me a favor, do a pause on this video even and just check, are you subscribed? Because YouTube often throws you all these videos that you love, but you're not subscribed. It does really help me and this channel to know, like, do better and reach more people and know what it is that you want to hear about, all the topics. So thank you. And we're quite a community here, so make sure you check the comments as well, because there's always gold down there from you all about your own experiences on these topics. I love our community that we have here, so check those comments. Okay, so back on topic. What is Franken patterning? I think this is quite a hilarious name when I first heard it. It is really describing the process that we do at home when it's like taking one pattern and another pattern and kind of like mushing them together to create your own pattern. Lots of sticky tape involved, lots of bits and pieces of stuff, just like Frankenstein's monster, if you will, where it's got bits of human all, stitched together. We're doing that with patterns. That's where the sort of name comes from. When I first heard this, I thought it was so funny because I really could not understand the way that it was said. Was just like, oh yes, but I only Frankenstein my patterns, or it's a total Franken pattern together. And it was said with tones always, I still hear it now, of like, I shouldn't be doing this, or I only, like I didn't do it right. I just did my thing and just mushed things together because that's all I could do. I'm not very good at pattern making. I don't know how to pattern draft, and so it's just Franken patterned it together. And oh, don't judge me, I didn't do it very well, right? It's always with tones of like that under it, and I could never understand why, because to me, putting different parts of patterns together, each creating your own pattern, that is pattern making. That's part of pattern drafting, pattern making, whatever you want to call it, of creating your own patterns. That is the first step. So congratulations if you're there or ever said that yourself, because you have made it to the next step in your sewing journey where you're able to understand the patterns enough and how you can start combining different elements to create your own patterns. Well done. So why do we think it's cheating? I think we have this like modern stigma around it, like it feels like it's breaking the rules, or we're doing something we shouldn't, or we're doing something that's not right or professional or something like that. I think it's just because the old skills that we used to have just kind of been lost. So once upon a time, it was absolutely meant to be altered, right? When you got a pattern, it was expected that you would change the hem, make it bigger or smaller as needed. I don't know, create the design line out the side. I don't know, make a whole new design line if you like. You like that sleeve of that one, but that bodice of the other, just put them together, right? Because the average skill level was probably much higher than it is now. I think we can all agree on that, of what the average home sewist knew. And so it was just part of sewing, right? There was basic skills that you knew at that time. So it was assumed that that's what you would do with your patterns. And you didn't have lots and lots and lots of patterns, of course, you just had a few, and companies didn't come out with them all the time. Let's fast forward today, where the average home sewer skill level is much lower, right? Because we don't do it in school, no one's taught it, and it's just less and less. That it's not about the skill anymore, it's more about consumerism and buying the new pattern, buying the new style, and that's what's been thrown to us. We've been conditioned to think this way now, that it's just you get your pattern, you get your fabric, and you follow the instructions because, you know, in 2 weeks there's a whole nother new style coming out. Why would you make it yourself when there's a whole new style, right? You get a whole new pattern for it. And I think we've been trained into this. So I think that's kind of why we think it's breaking the rules, is because we think that we should just be like, that's the pattern, so you just do it like that. I think that's why we feel the way we do, and that's why that connotations where people say, like, it's just Franken patterned or scared to do it, that we're doing something wrong. We're not. We're not. Your sewing at home pattern has always been the starting point, not the end result. So keep that in mind, I think, because that's how it always was historically, as sewing patterns were invented for. That's what they were invented for. Okay, so you want to do this, or you've already started and maybe had success or not. Let's talk about a few things that can help you in this Franken pattern journey when you are ready for it. How do you know when you're ready for it? Well, if you want to do it and you can understand patterns enough to kind of know what seam allowance is and grain lines and how things go together, then you are ready, and you just dive in and do it. So first up, you must take note of grain lines. So the same grain lines must apply to all the pieces that you're doing. You don't have one on the bias and one not, and one this way or that way, or when you're adding things, you've got to keep all your grain lines nice and flowing through. Really consider the ease and proportions of the garments that you're trying to put together. So for example, if you're thinking of using a bodice of a dress and changing out the skirt, because you might have a different dress skirt, you know, we're talking with a dress with a waist seam that has pleats on it, and another one that is just straight. Think about the proportions of that. Does this bodice really in line with a more straight pencil skirt that it was originally for? Or would it still look good with a big full gathered pleated number that you want to put it with? Think about the proportions of the garment as you change those different silhouettes. It's probably what you're trying to achieve, but always then really look at it to make sure that they kind of match. Make sure the ease that you're looking at is similar. So where to start with ease? All right, so ease is the extra room on the garment for move and for fit. I've made videos on this recently, so hopefully you've watched those. If not, I'm going to link them all down below. But you want the same sort of fit for the same sort of fit on each kind of pattern pieces that you might be mushing together, right? And so you don't want a tight fitting bodice with another bodice that you've got that's looser, because the skirt size is going to be different to fit, and it can just be harder to have to manage and navigate, right? Because they're not just going to fit in exactly like puzzle pieces. You'll need to adjust it. You know, the waist size of the bodice that you want will never be exactly the same as the waist of the other one, but you want to get one as close as possible so there's less to have to maybe manipulate your darts to get in or take it off the side seams or something like that, because you need to make it fit somehow by measuring it and making it fit. So really take note of ease as well. If you want the same kinds of fits, i.e. tight and loose, against the types of patterns that you're trying to Franken pattern together. Sleeves and armholes are a big one. I know we want to change these a lot. Can be quite compatible, and sometimes they cannot. Really, the easiest, simple way to think of it is your sleeve head shape. So your armhole shape is one thing and your sleeve head shape is another, and they kind of go together to create the sleeve that you want. So if you have a really, like your pattern is made for a flat sleeve, like a like a men's shirt, if you've ever looked at the sleeve head, there's almost none, right? And it's more like a rectangle. Don't go ahead and then place a really high curve onto the bodice, because the bodice probably isn't tailored and shaped enough to fit that tailored and shaped sleeve that you're going to get with that. So keep them rather similar. As long as they're similar, the good thing about sleeves is that they have lots of ease built in, so you can just do a little more, do a little less, and kind of smush it in. As long as they're meant to be what we just talked about before, the fit of the garment is about the same. So you've got a loose fit, a tight fit from the same sorts of bodices that you've stolen the sleeve from. You can generally mush them together quite easily, but they're the things to take note of. Fabric types, of course. Don't swap some pattern made for a knit for a woven. That is not going to work at all. It must be wovens for wovens, knits for knits. I don't need to say more on that, I don't think. All right, so how could you get started with doing this? What are some easy Franken pattern moves to start, and what are some more difficult ones? Well, start with a pattern that you already know fits you kind of well. It's good to start with your base pattern, one that you've made before and you kind of know the fit of, and then use that as your base to Franken pattern 2. So some good starts are necklines. This is a really easy swap because you can just simply trace off the different necklines onto the bodice that you like, right? Easy peasy. Just can make sure that you're aware of what neckline finishes that you have that suit your new neckline. So if you're using a bias facing, that's great because you can just apply that to anything. A bias binding, you can probably apply that to almost any shape. If you've got a facing though, a shaped facing, you will need to create a new shaped facing for your new shape. You could use the one that came with the original neckline that you put onto this new one, but honestly, facings are really easy to make. You could definitely attempt to make your own first one. It's one of the first pattern making things that I show people how to do in Vintage Sewing School. Like it's the super easy. It's the first pattern making like from scratch. So you could do it. You could definitely make your own facing for that new neckline, but just make those considerations when you do that. You could easily swap the different lengths. Say you've got different skirt lengths that you like, adding and mushing those together from other patterns, and even like sleeve lengths, and getting that so you kind of Franken pattern those together. I think a great after that next step is to start looking at different bodices and skirt combinations. So say if you've got that dress that we talked about with a waist seam, putting different bodices onto different skirts and kind of mixing those together work really well. As long as you've got the right sort of same kind of fit, you know, that they fit similar, then you could just tweak the bodice to fit the skirt, or the skirt to fit the bodice, whichever way you want to go around it. And then that's a really, really great way because that's how you really start mixing and matching. So bodice and skirt combinations. Then as you progress, you can definitely go to sleeves. I only put sleeves as a little bit more because sleeves are always tricky. Those pattern shapes just do not make sense to anyone. So it can just be a bit trickier. You just want a little bit more understanding of how they work to be able to then, you know, mush them and Franken pattern them together. But sleeves is definitely like doable option to mush them together and make your own unique style out of it. You could then start looking at collars and different areas like that. So putting one collar, you'll need to kind of transfer the neckline with the collar, but you can like mush them together, right? You know, you just kind of place your pattern on one and trace out the other. Now, I don't want to give you a tutorial on how to do it because there is no how to do any of this. It's all individual. And that's the point at the beginning when I said, if you feel ready for it and you can kind of understand patterns enough, then you'll know you are ready, because you just need to make sure you know where the stitch line is, you know how much seam allowance is on there, you know that must match that, and these need to match together. So as you mush them together, the two patterns together, you need to make sure that they align. When you can see this sort of stuff, you are ready. You won't get it right the first time. That's fine. It's not about that. But that is how you get better and better and know what you need to do differently next time to make them work together. And of course, you just keep going on and on from there as you learn the principles of patterns and the base foundation knowledge of patterns, how they work, stitch lines, flow throughs, things like that. This is how you just then build, and you keep building, you keep Franken patterning, and you create your own unique patterns that are just for you. This is the way it was always meant to be. I think the secret to making it work is really just losing the stigma that I think that we have around it, right? So just having it as the attitude that this is what you're supposed to do, right? You're not breaking the rules, you're not breaking the pattern, you're not doing something that you shouldn't be doing. This is pattern making, and when you go with it, you know, I think that lightens the load, right? A few tips though. Let's talk some hot tips to making this work that I've got for you. One, never cut up and into your original pattern. Keep that intact and literally draw off and trace and create a new pattern so you always have your originals to go back to on hand. I don't need to say more about that, right? You know why. The next thing you want is really good sticky tape. So something that you can actually lift up and back without tearing up your paper pattern, whether it's the tissue or paper pattern. You want to be able to lift up the sticky tape and make adjustments, put it back down. Trust me, you will want to, and be able to draw on top of it is really useful as well. So something like this Scotch Magic tape, there are other tapes like that, but that's what you want to be able to do, is to peel it up and it doesn't tear your paper, and to be able to draw on it. Makes a huge difference when you're pattern making. Like, that's just your sticky tape you use for all your patterns. Because you're using sticky tape, this is one really, really good reason why we have different fabric scissors to paper scissors. Side note, I was going to grab my fabric scissors, but I've legitimately lost my fabric scissors right now. I do not know where they are. I cannot find them in this room. Please tell me I'm not the only one who's lost their fabric scissors. This is the first time it's happened to me. So pretend fabric scissors are here, and these are my paper scissors that I use for patterns. They've even got sticky tape on the handle. That's like how sticky tape they are, because you will get sticky stuff all over your blades here, and it will get dirty with pencil and things like that. You don't want to use that on your fabric. So that's why we have different scissors, right? So if you have been dismissing your own work, saying it's just Franken patterning, or I just Frankensteined it together, or I just did pattern hacking, and dismissing your own work like that, it's time to stop, because you aren't breaking the rules or cheating or anything. You are in fact designing and creating your own patterns. You just start small and keep building your skills. And that is something that you should feel really good about. Okay, my sewing friends, I would love to hear about your pattern mashup experiences. Tell me down below, what was your first pattern hacking, Frankenstein pattern mashup, whatever you like to call it, or just pattern making, as I like to call it, experience. Write those comments down below. Funny ones, good stories, things that worked, things that didn't are all welcome. Remember, read those comments, because there'll be so much information down there for you as well. Until next time, my sewing friends, happy pattern Frankensteining, mushing, pattern hacking. Okay, happy sewing. See you next time. Bye.